Gregory Turner sat at the oak dining table that had seen 27 Christmas dinners, 15 birthdays, and now, one betrayal he couldn't quite name yet. The late afternoon light fell across Samantha's laptop, the bluish glow cutting sharp against her calm, confident face. "Greg, it's really not that complicated," she said, scrolling through spreadsheets like a seasoned accountant. "If we transfer the savings into Chloe's LLC, we can write off part of the business expenses. It's just smart money management, everyone does it." Her tone was brisk, assured, the same tone she used when ordering expensive decor or dismissing his questions about bills. Gregory rubbed his temples. "I don't like our money being anywhere that's not our account." She didn't look up. "That's because you think like a retiree, not like an investor." He sighed. "I think like someone who's worked 40 years to make sure we don't owe anyone a damn thing." That earned him a smile, small, amused, and cutting. "Greg, you'll never understand how real business works. Chloe's done this before. It's legal. It's efficient. You'll thank me later." He stared at her for a long moment. The confidence in her voice was unsettling, rehearsed, like she'd had this conversation already, just with someone else listening. The family ledger sat beside him, a heavy book bound in leather and worn from years of careful notes. Mortgage payments, college funds, vacation budgets. Every page was written in his hand, the numbers neat, the ink faded in places. He'd always believed that if he could see every cent, he could trust every person. Now, looking at his wife behind her laptop, he wasn't sure either was true. "Why does it have to be in Chloe's name?" he asked finally. She rolled her eyes. "Because she owns the business, Greg. I'm just a partner. It's simpler for taxes if the savings run through her LLC. It looks cleaner." "Cleaner," he repeated, his voice flat. Samantha leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Please, stop overthinking. You always do this. Every time I try to move us forward, you drag your feet." He felt the words hit somewhere deep, in the quiet places where doubt turns into shame. She'd learned how to twist his sense of duty into weakness, his caution into cowardice. Outside, the rain began tapping against the window. The sound filled the silence between them, a slow, steady rhythm, like a ticking clock counting down to something neither of them could name. He picked up the pen. "If this backfires, it won't," she interrupted, her voice quick, too quick. "You trust me, don't you?" That question used to mean something. Now it felt like a trap dressed as affection. Still, he signed, not because he trusted her, but because after 3 decades of marriage he couldn't bear to admit he didn't. Samantha smiled brightly, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "You'll see. This is how people build wealth, not by hoarding money in old ledgers." He watched her close the laptop, gather her files, and disappear into her home office, humming to herself. The room grew quiet. Gregory turned back to the ledger, opening it to a blank page. His pen hovered over the paper before he finally wrote, "Transfer to Chloe's LLC, per Samantha. My hesitation noted." He stared at that last sentence. My hesitation noted. As if it could protect him later, when the truth came calling. The rain grew heavier, blurring the windows into streaks of grey. He thought about the long years of work that had filled those ledger pages, paychecks earned by calloused hands, nights spent calculating bills by candlelight when the power went out, plans made and kept. Now, it all felt like numbers borrowed from someone else's story. In the hallway, he heard Samantha's laughter, light, effortless, followed by the faint murmur of her voice on the phone. He caught one line before she closed the door. "Yeah, he signed it, told you he would." The pen slipped from his hand and rolled off the table. He didn't bother picking it up. He sat there for a long time, listening to the sound of rain and realization mixing in the air. When he finally stood, he looked at the ledger again, not as a record of money, but as a record of faith. Every line an act of trust, every number a promise. He closed it gently, his thumb resting on the embossed cover as if touching the pulse of something dying slowly. "She said it was just for taxes," he murmured to the empty room. "Turns out she was taxing everything I'd ever trusted." Gregory's memories drifted back to when the walls of their home still echoed with ambition instead of argument. He could still see the small one-bedroom apartment in their 20s, mismatched furniture, paint chips in the corners, and Samantha sitting cross-legged on the floor with her sketchbook. She was an artist then, not a schemer. She'd designed living rooms for imaginary clients, and he'd promised to build them someday when the real ones came. He handled the numbers, the bills, the boring parts. She handled the dreams, the colour, the spark, the charm that made strangers trust her instantly. Together, they made it work. He'd wake at 5 a.m., go to the logistics yard, manage the chaos of trucks and schedules, then come home smelling of oil and dust. She'd show him her designs over dinner, napkin sketches, new ideas, soft excitement in her eyes. Those were good years, not rich ones, but honest ones. Then came Chloe. Her sister was the kind of person who always wanted a shortcut to success but refused to admit it. She'd start one business, fail, and blame bad luck. Then another, and another. Samantha would bail her out every time. "Greg, it's just a loan," she'd insist, handing over another check. He'd sign reluctantly, warning, "You can't keep funding someone who doesn't want to build her own foundation." Samantha would roll her eyes. "She's family. You and your ledgers wouldn't understand." And that became their pattern. Her chasing appearances, him keeping score in silence. He remembered one particular night. They were sitting on the couch when she showed him a glossy magazine spread, elegant homes, grand chandeliers, imported marble. "I want us to live like this someday," she said, her voice low, hypnotic. He laughed softly. "Those people probably owe half of what they own. Or maybe they're just smarter than you think." That line didn't leave him for days. It was the first time he saw ambition in her eyes that didn't include him. Then her business started taking off. Small design gigs turned into bigger ones. Clients liked her confidence, even when her company wasn't ready for high-end work. She loved the attention, the compliments, the invitations to luxury events. Gregory went along, smiling beside her, still proud. But gradually, the work changed. The firm's finances tangled with personal accounts, temporary loans moved between their savings and her company. Every month, the ledger grew messier. Tom Willis, his accountant and closest friend since college, noticed it first. During a quarterly review, Tom closed the folder slowly, leaned back and said, "Greg, can I give you advice you won't like?" "Always," Tom sighed. "Never mix family and money. It's not a partnership, it's a gamble. And Samantha's sister, she's not the type who folds when she loses. She doubles down." Gregory smiled wearily. "It's just temporary. Samantha says she's getting the accounts sorted." "Does she now?" Tom asked, tapping the folder. "Because these transfers say otherwise. You're moving more into her firm than she's returning. You're bleeding savings, Greg." He closed the ledger, looking at Tom's concerned eyes across the desk. "You know how she is. She believes in her work." Tom shook his head. "You believe in her. There's a difference." That night he came home and found Samantha scrolling through social media, admiring influencers' designer kitchens. She turned to him and said, "We should upgrade. People judge your worth by what you show." Greg sat beside her quiet. "I always thought people judged by what you build." She smirked, eyes never leaving the screen. "That's why they pass you by, Greg. You build, they buy." The words hit like a slap. Not loud, not public, but one that lingered deep. He went to his office that night, opened the old ledger, and flipped through its pages. There was pride in every entry. The first mortgage payment, the college fund, the vacations paid in full. Every dollar accounted for. But lately the ink looked heavier, darker, smudged by her world's chaos bleeding into his. He thought about Chloe again. The woman who once showed up at their door crying because she couldn't pay her staff. He gave her $10,000. She never repaid a cent. When he asked about it months later, she laughed. "Oh, Greg, it's family money. What's yours is ours." He should have known then. But love makes you audit feelings instead of facts. The years passed and Samantha's world became louder. Champagne toasts, business brunches, photos with clients who called her visionary. His world grew smaller, quiet dinners alone, spreadsheets replacing laughter. He kept the house running, kept her safe, kept her image alive, even when she stopped saying thank you. And then one night, sitting by the fireplace, she said it without meaning to. "I wish you thought bigger." He looked up from his ledger. "Bigger than honesty?" She frowned. "You make it sound like honesty pays bills." That was the night something shifted in him. The way people stop believing a broken compass will ever point north again. He didn't confront her. He didn't shout. He just started paying attention. To the emails she hid, to the smiles she gave Chloe when he mentioned money, to the missing zeros in their savings account. Now, years later, sitting in the same house under the same roof, he saw it all clearly. The ledger was no longer just paper. It was prophecy. He turned to the last page, ran his fingers across the faded ink, and whispered to himself, "If deceit ever found its way into my books, I'd balance the pages myself." Gregory had always trusted numbers. They didn't lie, didn't shift with emotion, didn't wear perfume to hide the scent of deceit. But lately, the numbers had stopped making sense. It started small. A few automatic withdrawals he didn't recognize. "Business expenses," Samantha said with a distracted tone, typing on her phone while sipping her imported coffee. "Chloe needed to cover some supply costs, but it's temporary. Don't worry." He wanted to believe her, but belief had started to feel like signing another blank check. He began keeping notes in the margins of his ledger again, not with neat precision this time, but with quiet suspicion. "Transfer, $2,400. Vendor name unfamiliar. Credit card, luxury showroom. Cash withdrawal, no receipt." He didn't mention it, not at first. He'd learned that asking questions in this house now felt like trespassing. But one evening, when she breezed in wearing a gold bracelet that didn't exist yesterday, he asked anyway, "Did we ever close out the business card? I'm seeing more transactions than we agreed on." She looked up from her phone, irritation flickering in her eyes. "Greg, please. It's handled. You worry about pennies like we're broke. We're not." "I'm not worried about pennies," he said evenly. "I'm worried about patterns." She laughed lightly, dismissing the tension with practiced ease. "You always sound like an auditor when you talk like that. Just let me manage this, okay?" He wanted to believe her, but her tone, casual, careless, was the sound of someone who'd already stopped respecting the person sitting across from her. The next morning, Gregory met with Tom Willis at their favorite coffee shop downtown. Tom arrived with a manila folder, expression grim. "Greg," he said, sliding the folder across, "you need to see this." Inside were copies of account updates, documents Gregory hadn't signed. His name, once listed as co-signer on the new LLC account, was gone. Removed. Replaced by primary owner Samantha Turner. He stared at the papers for a long moment, then finally asked, "When did this happen?" Tom's voice was quiet. "About 2 months ago. The bank processed it digitally. E-signature authorization. Looks like they used that old power of attorney you told me about." The same one she'd convinced him to sign years ago, just in case. Gregory felt the room narrow around him. Conversations blurred into noise. Tom leaned forward. "Greg, this isn't mismanagement. This is premeditated. She's making sure you don't exist in her books anymore." Greg rubbed the bridge of his nose, silent. A part of him wanted to shout, to call Samantha right then and there, but another part, the one that had kept ledgers for 30 years, knew that numbers told stories better than anger ever could. "Can you trace where the funds are moving?" he asked. Tom nodded. "I already did. Transfers go from your joint savings into Chloe's LLC, then into a second account under the business name Luxa Vista Designs. Guess who the listed owner is?" Greg didn't answer. He didn't need to. Tom sighed. "You've got enough here to build a case, but I know you, Greg. You'll want to understand the why before the how." Gregory managed a faint, humorless smile. "Always have." That night, he returned home late. Samantha was on the couch, laptop open, laughter soft as she texted someone. He stood by the doorway just watching for a moment. The person he saw wasn't his wife anymore, just a stranger rehearsing affection between lies. He walked past her quietly, into his office and turned on his old desktop computer. He hadn't checked their shared email in months. It was mostly bills, client messages, promotions, nothing personal anymore. But tonight, buried between invoices and newsletters, he found it. An email thread titled, Phase 2, Freedom Plan. It was between Samantha and Chloe. Chloe: once the LLC's balance clears, we'll close Greg's access completely. You'll have full signing rights by next quarter. Samantha: finally getting him out of the way. The man keeps ledgers like it's 1950. He'll never catch up. Chloe: good. Then you can finally live like you deserve. Samantha: I already do. He read it twice, then a third time, slower. Each word sank like a stone into the quiet room. He didn't slam the desk. He didn't break anything. He simply leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and let the betrayal rewrite what little hope remained. He thought of all the nights he'd stayed late, running numbers, making sure every dollar aligned. He thought of her voice saying, "Trust me, Greg." And now he knew. The trust was the transaction. He printed the emails, placed them neatly in the ledger, and labeled the page in red ink. Proof of fraud. April. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, shaking the old shutters. Samantha knocked lightly on the office door. "You coming to bed?" He turned, face calm, the printed papers hidden under his arm. "Yeah, just finishing up some old numbers." She smiled, unaware, untouched by guilt. "Don't stay up too late. You worry too much." When she walked away, he looked at the door long after it closed and whispered under his breath, not in anger, but in revelation. "They moved the money on paper, but they forgot I kept every receipt of my life." The letter came on a Tuesday morning. Plain white envelope, government seal printed in sharp black ink. Gregory stood at the mailbox for a long time before opening it. He didn't need to see the sender to know it wasn't good news. Internal Revenue Service. Audit notification. He unfolded the document slowly, eyes scanning line after line until one phrase stopped him cold. Suspicious financial activity linked to your accounts. Not their accounts. His. He walked back inside, the envelope trembling slightly in his hands. Samantha was sitting at the kitchen island, tapping away on her tablet, a half-eaten croissant beside her. He set the letter down in front of her. She blinked. "What's this?" "Read it," he said. She scanned the first paragraph, her confident posture faltering. "Oh my God, Greg, this must be a mistake." He said nothing, just waited. Samantha's eyes darted nervously across the page. This is probably from Chloe's filings. I told her to handle the quarterly reports. Maybe she used the wrong EIN number." Gregory's tone was steady, too steady. "You told her to handle our taxes?" Samantha looked up, startled by the calm in his voice. "It's all within the business. I swear it's just a misunderstanding. I'll fix it." He studied her face, the forced innocence, the flicker of guilt. He'd seen that same look before, years ago, when she'd broken a promise and tried to make it sound like a favor. He folded the letter neatly and slid it into his jacket pocket. "No, I'll fix it." That afternoon, he met Tom at his office. Tom had already heard the news. The IRS letter was standard procedure, he explained. They're tracing multiple transactions connected to her LLC. The good news? We have everything we need to prove who did what. He handed Greg a thick folder. Bank statements, digital authorizations, timestamps, all cross-referenced. Every withdrawal from your joint account is here, matched with deposits into her sister's company. There's no way out for them. Gregory nodded slowly. "Let them ask for names." Tom leaned forward. "You sure you're ready for that? This won't be quiet." Greg smiled faintly, a tired kind of smile that comes when the fight is already over in your heart. "Tom, I was married to her for 30 years. I lived through every version of her noise. Silence won't scare me now. For the next several nights, he sat at his desk after midnight, sorting through everything. He opened the old family ledger one last time, the same one he'd kept since the start of their marriage. Its pages were yellowed, corners curled from time and truth. Line by line he compared the old notes with the new evidence. Every deposit, every transfer, every lie. He didn't add anger to the page, just numbers, facts, dates. By the third night he realized something. The ledger wasn't just a record of money, it was a map of their marriage. Steady in the beginning, chaotic toward the end, then blank pages where trust should have been. Samantha hovered around him for days, her tone shifting from defensive to desperate. "Greg, you're overreacting." I told Chloe to fix it. "I'll handle the accountant myself. This could ruin us." He finally looked at her, his voice quiet but unshakable. "It already did." She fell silent the first time she didn't have a line rehearsed. That weekend, he drove to Tom's office again with a small box. Bank statements, email printouts, screenshots, and copies of her fraudulent filings. Tom asked, "You sure you want to go this far?" Greg placed the box gently on the desk. "I didn't come this far to stop before the truth." When he returned home that evening, the house felt emptier than usual. Samantha had gone out, probably to see Chloe, probably to plot a way out. Greg went to his office, took the family ledger in his hands, and flipped to the last page. He took his pen and wrote one final entry. Account settled. Evidence preserved. Ledger closed. Then he locked it inside the bottom drawer, turned the key, and whispered to himself, "Some records are worth keeping clean." He sat back, exhaled slowly, and for the first time in months, he felt something close to calm. Not peace yet. That would take time. But control. He picked up his phone, opened his email, and forwarded every document to Tom with a single line. "The IRS wanted names. I'm ready to give them hers." As he hit send, the soft click of the mouse felt final, like the sound of a door closing gently behind him and another one opening somewhere brighter. The federal building smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and fear. Gregory sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, hands folded neatly on a leather folder. To his left, Tom Willis organized a stack of documents with quiet precision. Across from them sat Samantha and Chloe, polished, confident, wrapped in designer blazers and perfume thick enough to mask panic. The IRS investigator, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a voice like sandpaper, looked over the files in silence for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was without ceremony. "Mrs. Turner, Miss Caldwell, thank you for coming. We've reviewed the initial reports and there are several irregularities in the transactions linked to your LLC." Samantha straightened in her chair, smiling tightly. "I assure you it's all just a misunderstanding. My sister and I run a design firm. My husband," she gestured dismissively toward Gregory, "is retired. He's not involved in the business side of things." Gregory didn't flinch. He simply looked down at his hands. Calm. Still. The investigator adjusted his glasses and turned to Chloe. "Miss Caldwell, these business accounts list both your names as signatories, yet there are multiple transfers from Mr. Turner's personal savings, without his consent. Can you explain that?" Chloe flashed a rehearsed smile. "He gave verbal approval. It was all family money. We were just helping him organize his finances." Tom's voice broke the silence, firm and measured. "Then you shouldn't mind if we verify that claim?" He slid a thin USB drive across the table. "These are the digital signatures from every transfer, time-stamped and geolocated. Each one executed under Ms. Turner's login credentials, not Mr. Turner's." The investigator nodded, inserting the drive into his laptop. The room filled with the faint hum of the machine. On the screen the data appeared, line after line of transactions, each stamped with Samantha Turner, authorized user. The investigator leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Turner, this is your digital signature, correct?" Samantha's mouth opened, then closed. Her voice faltered. I don't remember signing those. Chloe handled most of it. Chloe's head snapped toward her. Excuse me. You told me he approved it. You said you had access to everything. The investigator raised a hand. Ladies, please. Samantha's tone turned brittle. You don't understand. It was supposed to be a temporary adjustment. We were consolidating accounts for tax purposes. Gregory finally looked up, his voice calm and deliberate. You called it a tax shelter. I called it theft. The investigator glanced at him, nodding faintly. Mr. Turner, your cooperation has been appreciated. Your documentation made our job much easier. He turned back to Samantha and Chloe, flipping through his notes. Based on this evidence, and the fact that both of you used his power of attorney for unauthorized transfers, the liability rests solely on your LLC. Mr. Turner is cleared of all suspicion. Samantha's composure broke. Cleared? You mean... Your accounts will be frozen pending formal charges, the investigator continued. You may appeal, but the records are indisputable. Chloe stood abruptly, her voice sharp. This isn't fair. She said he was fine with it. Sit down, Samantha hissed. But Chloe was already pacing. You dragged me into this. You said it was legal. You said he'd never find out. The investigator closed the folder with a soft thud. The sound of finality. Ladies, your argument isn't my concern. What matters is intent, and the records show both of you benefited financially from unauthorized transfers. Samantha's voice cracked. We can fix this. Please, there must be something. Tom stood, gathering the remaining files into his briefcase. You had your chance to fix it before you forged the first signature. Gregory rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. He looked at Samantha one last time. Her eyes were wet, mascara streaking faintly. She reached out, a trembling hand halfway between apology and desperation. He didn't take it. Instead, he adjusted his cufflinks and said softly, You always wanted to control the numbers. I just made sure they finally told the truth. The investigator handed Gregory a document, official confirmation of his cleared status. Mr. Turner, you're free to go. He nodded once, thanked the man, and turned toward the door. Behind him, voices clashed, Samantha pleading, Chloe shouting, the investigator raising his tone to restore order. But Gregory didn't stop. He didn't need to. Outside, the sun was brighter than it had been in months. Tom joined him on the steps, exhaling heavily. You all right? Gregory looked out over the city, steady, unshaken. I am now. He smiled faintly, watching the light reflect off the courthouse windows like a mirror of justice finally catching up. They called it a tax shelter, he said quietly. Turns out it was a truth shelter, and theirs just collapsed. Rain had started to fall again, thin and cold, the kind that soaked through fabric but never quite touched the fire underneath. Gregory stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, hands in his coat pockets, breathing in the quiet relief that came only after years of noise. He heard her before he saw her. Greg! Samantha's voice, desperate, cracked, echoed off the marble walls. She stumbled down the steps, heels slipping, tears streaking her makeup. You ruined my life! She shouted, clutching her purse like it was all she had left to hold. Gregory turned slowly, meeting her eyes. His voice was calm, not cruel, the voice of a man who'd stopped arguing with the past. No, he said softly. You signed it away. She froze. For a moment the city noise vanished, just her breathing and the faint sound of rain tapping against the stone. Her tone shifted, trembling now. We can rebuild. Please, Greg, we can fix this. I'll talk to the IRS, He shook his head, slow and firm. You can't rebuild from numbers written in lies. She stepped closer, voice breaking. I thought you'd understand. You always helped me. You were supposed to protect us. Greg's jaw tightened. I did. Until you turned us into you. The words landed heavy, honest, final. He reached into his coat and pulled out the old family ledger. Worn edges, weathered cover, pages yellowed by years of work and love. He opened it to the last page, the same one where he'd once written, "Proof of fraud, April." This time, he took his pen, pressed it against the paper, and wrote 3 simple words: "Debt paid in full." The ink bled slightly from the rain, spreading just enough to look like closure. Samantha took a step forward. "Greg, please, I didn't mean—" He closed the ledger gently, the sound crisp and final. "Meaning doesn't erase math," he said. "And this ledger's balanced." She tried again, voice small. "What happens now?" He looked at her, not with hatred, not even disappointment, just understanding, the kind that comes too late. "Now," he said, "you learn what every lie costs when the bill finally comes due." He turned and started walking down the steps, rain glistening on his shoulders. Behind him, Samantha's voice cracked into sobs, echoing off the courthouse facade. He didn't stop, didn't look back. Halfway to the curb, he paused only once, glancing at the courthouse doors, where she stood small against the massive pillars that had just crushed her illusion of control. He whispered to himself, almost like a note in his own book. "Some lessons aren't written in ink," he said quietly. "They're carved in loss." Then he slipped the ledger under his arm and disappeared into the soft grey rain. A man finally even with the past. The lake was still that morning, glass flat, the sky resting quietly on its surface. Gregory stood by the window with a mug of black coffee, the kind he'd been brewing since his first year of marriage, long before life got complicated. Months had passed since the hearing. The storms had settled, the headlines faded. The IRS had sent its final notice weeks ago. Case closed. No further action required. A single sheet of paper that felt heavier than the years it represented. Samantha and Chloe's company didn't survive the fallout. The fraud charges froze their assets, and the bank repossessed everything with their names on it. The sisters disappeared from the city's business circles. No more charity events, no more glossy photos, no more hollow laughter. Gregory hadn't spoken to either of them since that day at the courthouse. He didn't need to. Some conversations end without a single word being said. Tom dropped by every few weekends. This morning was one of them. He arrived with a bag of pastries and that same grin that had carried Gregory through the storm. "Still like your coffee plain, huh?" Tom said, settling into the chair opposite him. Gregory smiled faintly. "Some habits don't need fixing." They sat quietly for a moment, listening to the wind move through the trees. "You ever think about what you'd say to her?" Tom asked gently. Gregory looked out over the lake. "Nothing that needs saying. I think she already heard it, the moment she lost the noise that used to drown me out." Tom nodded, tapping his mug. "You did good, Greg. You didn't chase revenge. You just told the truth and let it stand." Gregory's eyes softened. "They used my honesty to build their fraud. I used their fraud to rebuild my honesty." He reached for the stack of papers beside him. New documents, this time for something worth signing. The Turner Trust for Retired Workers and Financial Literacy, a small non-profit built with the recovered funds, designed to help older workers protect their savings, read contracts, and never get trapped by fine print again. He smiled as he signed the final line. This time every signature felt clean. Tom stood, glancing out the window. "So what now?" Gregory looked up, his tone light but firm. "Now I build again, not homes, not wealth. Just peace." Outside, the lake rippled gently under the morning sun, a reflection so clear it almost looked like another world beneath the water. He raised his cup in a quiet toast, more to himself than anyone else. "Revenge ends when truth stands tall," he murmured, and for the first time in a long time he meant every word.